So brief intro from me, Jonathan Tuliani. I'm the Managing Director in Europe with Opsgility. I've been in this role, 2.5, 3 years. Before that, I was nearly 10 years in Microsoft working in the Azure product group. I was the program manager on Azure DNS and Azure Traffic Manager. I was part of Azure long before Azure even had a virtual machine, would you believe? And I was actually part of the team that helped deliver the initial virtual machines release back in the classic days. I'm the author of one of the authors on the Azure Administrator exam reference book, the AZ 103 book. The 104 isn't out yet. And I am a Microsoft certified trainer. So there we go. My role in Opsgility, for those who don't know Opsgility, we're a training provider. We specialize in Microsoft Cloud. We have in-person training and on-demand training. Take a screenshot of that if you're interested. I'll put it up at the end, but we're not going to spend time on that today. Great. OK, so we're going to talk about Azure management at scale with Azure Lighthouse. This is typically a scenario that's of most interest to partners. And also in some enterprises who are in multi-tenant environments. Large enterprises sometimes end up in multi-tenant situations. So we're going to go through this. We're going to go pretty deep on how to get started, how to use Lighthouse, and the permissions as well. We'll dive into that because there's some subtleties there. This is all about control. It's all about who can manage what. So permissions is a very important part of it. And we'll also, of course, look at the big picture and the scenarios of why you'd like to do this. So let's dive in. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go pretty quickly. But yeah, do jump in with questions as we go. So let's start with just a bit of revision. I'm going to assume a certain amount of familiarity with Azure here, but we're just going to revise some key points about how access control works in Azure. So in Azure, your identity comes from Azure AD. So Azure AD is where you have the users and the user groups, and also where you have automation that's running. You have the managed identities and service principals. So all the identities are linked into Azure AD, and Azure AD is really outside of your Azure subscription. And in Azure AD, your account in Azure AD is called your tenant. So that's where all your users live within your Azure AD directory and tenant. Think of those as the same thing. That's your Azure AD account with all your users in it. And then, of course, you have your Azure subscriptions where you create your resources. And each subscription is linked to an Azure AD tenant. So your subscription lives within that tenant. And it's, if you have a particular subscription, you can use Azure role-based access control to grant permissions. And when you do a role assignment, it's really combining three things. You're saying, these are the permissions I want to grant. That's a role that's the role definition that the role assignment points to. And you say, these are the users I want to give permissions to. And that's the Azure AD object. And then you say, well, and this is the scope of resources that I want these permissions to apply to. And that could be a subscription, a resource group, or perhaps even an individual resource or a management group containing multiple subscriptions. So that's how you assign permissions, that links together. The assigning of the permissions is what links together the subscriptions and the users. But of course, you can only assign permissions to users who are in your directory. You can't assign permissions to users in a different directory. OK. So this, of course, is a challenge. When you have a partner who's managing Azure on behalf of other customers, maybe they do cost optimization services. They manage backup and keep ahead of backup services. There's many scenarios or security configurations, governance. There's many things that a partner may be doing on behalf of a customer. So until Lighthouse came along, let's look at the pre-Lighthouse world. There were two technologies available that enabled partners to manage customer subscriptions. And the first of them is Azure AD B2B collaboration. This is where you invite a guest into your tenant. So here the customer, we're going to talk throughout about in this scenario where you have a customer being managed by a partner, and the partner I'd sometimes call the MSP, the managed service provider. So you have a customer and the partner needs to manage the customer's stuff, which has to stay in the customer's realm because the customer's paying for it. It's staying in the customer's subscription. So you can have the customer invite the partner in as a guest into their directory. So now the partner logs in with their existing credentials. They don't need a new username and password. And once they've logged in with those credentials, they can switch directories. They can switch from their normal partner organization into the customer's organization. And they're in the customer's organization in this guest account, which has a different object ID in the directory, but it's still logged in with the existing credentials. And then, of course, that object ID in that directory, that guest object, can be granted permissions with role-based access control. And this works. It works really well. It's very useful for some scenarios where you're a consultant doing some one-off work with a customer. But if you're trying to manage large numbers of customers, if you're an MSP and you're managing 20 customers, you're going to be switching directories a lot. You're continually switching across that context between directories. And also, you don't have any overall view that spans the all of your customers. If you want to get a report of, okay, what's my virtual machine update status across all 20 of my customers, that's going to be hard work. You're going to have to write a substantial amount of work to gather that data across all these tenants, because your automation that you might write has the same problem. It has to continually switch context between these different tenants. There's no built-in roll-up reporting and multi-tenant. Okay, so that's the B2B collaboration. Also, you have to grant permission to individual users here. There's no group management. If you're a large partner with 20 people in your operations team, then the customer has to assign permission to 20 individuals, and they come and go, and that's just a huge mess. So that really doesn't, it works for an individual doing an individual task, but it doesn't really scale. Doesn't scale in terms of the number of users, doesn't scale in terms of the number of customers that the users are managing. The second option is called the AOBO. This is the act on behalf of. And this is a facility within the CSP program. This is where the partner, if they have what's called the admin agent role, if you grant that admin agent role to one of your staff, then that staff member and the partner effectively has owner permissions over all of the CSP subscriptions that are managed by that partner. And that's great. It has that scale across all the CSP subscriptions, but it's a little bit limiting that, again, you have this challenge that you've granted the permissions to the user, and they've got permissions to all of your customers now. So maybe you only want them to manage a subset, and one of your customers is really uptight about this, and you manage them with a different group or a smaller group. But no, it's either all or nothing. So that's a little bit lack of control, and it's also only the owner rights. You can't have any fine-grained access control here where you choose which roles are granted. And also the customer doesn't really have any visibility into this. You know, it's not something that the customer says, yeah, I'm happy for you to have that owner role because really this is owner and that's it. So these have significant limitations. They're both very useful, but they do have significant limitations. And this is why Lighthouse has been created, is to come up with is to really nail this whole scenario. Okay, so let's have a look. What is Lighthouse? So the goals of Lighthouse are to enable a partner, enable an MSP to manage multiple customers, 10, 20, 100 customers from their tenant without all that switch around that we have with the B2B collaboration. It also has some additional goals. It enables a marketplace channel for those partners. So the partner can publish themselves into this marketplace and say, I'm an MSP, I provide these services, and this is a marketplace. This is a discoverability. It's a lead generation avenue for that partner to make their services available to the customers. It also is a supporting technology behind what's called managed applications, which we're not going to go into too much detail today, but just to say what they are. That's where a partner, an ISV partner, can publish an application that the customer acquires, and the customer installs it in their own subscription. So the customer is paying the Azure costs, but the partner manages it. It's, hey, that's the clue. The clue's in the name, right? It's a managed application. So the partner manages it, and that means that firstly, the customer doesn't have permissions again, even though it's in their own subscription, they don't have permissions to mess with it and foul it up. But the partner does have the ability to go and manage these managed applications in the customer's subscriptions, and that's another one of these multi-tenant management scenarios. So that would be a great talk for another day to talk about managed applications. But for today, we're just going to focus on managing day-to-day resources in customer subscriptions. As I say, we're talking about everything today in the context of partners and customers, although this whole technology does work for non-partner customer scenarios. In particular, if you have a larger enterprise, they sometimes find themselves with more than one AAD tenant. For example, if there's an acquisition, they can easily find themselves with multiple AAD tenants. And Lighthouse is very much designed to help those enterprises manage those multi-tenant situations as well. The other thing to call out is there's no charge for using Azure Lighthouse. You're paying, of course, for the resources you create. This is all about encouraging Azure adoption and making Azure adoption successful. So this is a free service. Okay, so how does it work? At a high level, this is the key concept. It's called delegated access. And the idea is that your customer subscription stays in your customer tenant, but at the same time, that same subscription ID is kind of projected into the partner's tenant. So that this one subscription with one subscription ID can now be managed from two different tenants. It's visible from both tenants. It's that simple, that you're simply projecting the subscription ID into the partner tenant. Now, there's a process for how that's done, and we're going to talk through that. And in particular, what's very nice about that process is that the permissions that you give to the partner is you don't have to just give them owner role. In fact, you can't give them owner role. You get to to specify as the customer, when you do this projection of your subscription into the partner tenant, you get to specify or at least review what permissions you're granting. So that's the permissions are controlled, and the customer isn't the customer has visibility into that, and the partner has to work within those boundaries that the customer has seen. There's a little bit of we'll do some demos as we go along, but you can see a little bit of the UI on the screen there, where you can see the global subscription filter has changed for this. This is from the partner view, and they can choose. You can see here where you choose which subscriptions, if you have multiple subscriptions, which subscriptions you want to see in your Azure portal, and you can see here you're able to choose subscriptions from across Consoso and Fabricam. Consoso is the partner, and Fabricam is the customer in this talk. Okay, so let's have a look. One important thing to understand is this is all implemented at the Azure Resource Manager level. This whole tying together of how RBAC works and the multi-tenant scenario, this projection of the subscription, this is happening at the Resource Manager level. So therefore, this is happening on what we call the control plane in Azure. This is where you come in from the portal or PowerShell or CLI or SDKs, or even if you want to hit the REST API directly, you come in through Resource Manager and you're performing resource management operations. You're creating VMs, you're restarting web apps, you're whatever it is you're doing with networks, creating VNets, all the rest of it. So this is all about your resource management. Many of those resource providers expose their own endpoints, and there are various operations where you access those endpoints directly. For example, you can access Azure Storage through the storage endpoint, and you can authenticate in many ways there. You can use the access keys, you can use SAS tokens, but one of the ways you can access Azure Storage is authenticating requests using AAD. You can have AAD permissions to access storage. But because that does not go through Resource Manager, this Lighthouse control does not give access to those resource provider endpoints, those data plane endpoints. So you have a Key Vault endpoint, that again has authentication using AAD, uses AAD tokens to authenticate. But because that's not through Resource Manager, that's not in scope for Lighthouse. This is only about the control plane. So that's very important to bear in mind. Okay, scenarios. Why would a partner want to do this? Well, there's a ton of scenarios, and there's actually a very good documentation around this, and you'll see the link on the slide there for some descriptions of some of these scenarios partners can use this for. So think of all the things partners can do on behalf of their customers. You can be managing backup, managing disaster recovery environments, making sure backup's healthy and so on. So you can do that through Azure Lighthouse, and we may even get to see a very quick demo on that, see how time goes. Just monitoring, managing alerts, being able to trigger automation and so on, and that works very well. Managing policy on behalf of the customer, helping enforce their governance, reviewing policy compliance reports, even automatic remediation can be done. Automating, again, using automation, setting up some automation to manage the resources. And this is a nice feature here, is you can have the automation account that hosts all your automation scripts and so on in your partner tenant, and the automation through Lighthouse can access resources in the customer tenant, and that protects your IP. That means your customers don't get to root around in your automation account looking at all your scripts that you've invested months of labor into. So that's a nice feature. Also, you can manage things in Security Center, Azure Advisor as well, and of course, just managing resources, manage people's VMs, set up their applications for them, whatever they need to do. You can just manage all of that stuff through Lighthouse. Okay. So how do we get started? Let's have a look. There are two ways to enroll in Lighthouse to get this whole thing up and running. One of them is through the marketplace, where as an MSP you can publish an offer through the marketplace and have the customer sign up for that offer. And the other way is completely outside of the marketplace. You can do this through a template deployment, and I'm going to show you how both of those work. So on the marketplace side, the partner they have to be enrolled in the commercial marketplace program. They're going to have to be a gold cloud platform partner and sort of silver or gold. So they have to be enrolled in the marketplace program. And then from there, from the Partner Center portal, they will create what's called a managed service offer. They just do that from Partner Center, from the commercial marketplace program. And within that offer, there's a lot of details you specify in that offer. You'll specify a description of your organization, and you'll upload images of your logos, and you can put links to videos, and You know, there's all kinds of marketing stuff and just stuff that makes that marketplace offer look attractive. But in particular, there's some details you put in what's called a plan. Now, you can have multiple plans within your offer, but typically it's a one-to-one relationship. You just have one plan within your offer. And in the plan, you'll put a title and a summary and a description of your service. And also you'll put your tenant ID, the partner tenant ID. You'll put that, and that's really to say, look, this is the tenant that you're going to be projecting your subscription into if you sign up for this thing. And then you'll also specify whether the plan is public or private. Obviously, public plans are published in the marketplace. Private plans are published, but they're limited in scope. They are only available to certain subscription IDs that you list as part of your offer. So if you want to do this as a special offer just for one customer, you can do that. You list out their subscription IDs in the offer and make it a private plan. You can have up to 10 subscription IDs there. And then you also, as part of your plan, as part of what you're offering to the customer, you list out what permissions you need and who's going to get them. And there's one example of that on the right there of the images where it says manifest. You can see this is the plan manifest. You can see the tenant ID, and then you can see here you say, look, there's the object ID. Now that will typically be a user, or it will be a group, or if it's some automation that you're running, it could be a service principal or a managed identity. So you specify an AAD object ID. These guys are going to get permissions in the customer subscription, and you give them a name. You just to describe them. It doesn't come from the directory, so you can put anything you like there. But you describe who that is that's getting those permissions, and you define which role they're going to get. We'll look at that in more detail later. And here you can see they're getting the contributor role. But you don't have to use contributor. You can use a wide range of roles. We'll look at that, and then you go through a publication process for this offer. Now there's some review that goes on there. It'll take a few days. It's kind of published to privately first, and so you can test it. There's a process to go through, but you get this up into the marketplace as you go through that process. Then on the customer side, you will have to go to this thing called the service providers service within the Azure portal, and from there you can add a service provider offer. And you can browse the marketplace, choose your provider, give them contact details, and review the permissions that you're going to be granting them. Obviously, they need your contact details so they can arrange the commercial terms, because there's no billing that comes here between the partner and the customer. The billing is out of band effectively, so the partner and the customer make their own separate commercial relationship. So you accept terms, and there's some terms that make clear that basically if the partner does nefarious things within the customer subscription, Microsoft is not on the hook. This is very much, it's between those guys to trust each other. And of course, this is a trust relationship. I mean, you are giving access to your subscriptions. And then that first step sets up that relationship between the two organizations, if you like, but it doesn't actually get access to anything. There's then a separate step where you go in and you say, okay, we've set that up. Now, which resource groups am I going to give you access to, or am I going to give you access to the whole subscription? You go to this delegate access stage where you actually grant access over to for the scopes that you choose as a customer, the scopes you want to grant access to the partner. So that is how that works. As a customer, you can sign up with multiple partners. There's no reason why it has to be limited to just one partner. You can sign up for lots of partners if you like. Okay, so from the partner point of view again, once the customers sign up, you can go into this My Customers view in the portal, and you can list out the customers, which are the people who've done that initial acquisition from the marketplace to create that relationship. And then you can also go in a separate view, the delegations, where you can see the scopes they've given you access to, which resource groups, which subscriptions, and so on. And you do have the access here as a partner to remove scope delegations if there's something that you've been given access to that you don't want access to, but that will only work if you've set up your offer in the correct way with the correct permissions. So we'll talk more about that as we get into the permissions business. Let's have a look at this. So I'm just going to have a look here. So let me just show you how this works. So we go into Partner Center, we look at the dashboard. As Opportunity, we are registered in the commercial marketplace just for the purposes of this. So if I go into the overview here of the marketplace, commercial marketplace, you can see here I have one test offer here. This is my Jonathan test. So I click on this offer, and you can also create a new offer, of course. And you can see there's all these tabs here where I set up my offer. I can specify, CRM integration. I can specify, what just for this offer, there are these properties, how does it get categorized, and legal terms and conditions and so on, descriptions and all these things, for my offer listing. And the interesting stuff is under this thing here where it says the plan. So the plan, and again, typically you just have one plan, but you can have multiple. So I go into my plan that's within my offer. This is where all the technical details lives. And in here, the plan has its own listing, has its own description and so on. And it has, pricing and availability. The only supported option at the moment is that it's free, and you have to sort out your commercial relationship with the partner separately. But we may see other options there coming in the future. Here you set your visibility. Is it a private plan? And I can say the subscriptions that have access if it is a private plan. And then in the technical configuration, this is where I will configure you can have some versioning here. You can set the tenant ID, and you can say here who is going to get access. So I say, look, here's an objects ID within my partner organization, within my partner directory. And typically that will be a group rather than an individual user. That will be your operations team or your cost management team or your governance team or whoever it is that's going to be doing this stuff. And you provide that a name for that team, and you say what permissions they're going to get, and you can choose from the permissions from all the built-in roles here, or most of the built-in roles. We'll talk more about the permissions on some of the slides that come up. So here you can specify multiple different teams to get multiple different roles. You don't have to be limited to just a single role assignment. So you can specify the different roles. You can see here this guy is going to have a resource policy contributor. He's going to manage policy. User access administrator is a very interesting one, because if you have user access administrator, you might be thinking, well, if I have that role, well, then I can grant anything, right? I can grant other roles. I can grant owners. I can do anything I like. And they've thought about that. And they recognize that user access administrator is required because, for example, if you're setting up policy and policy remediation, you're going to be creating managed identities, and you need to be able to assign permissions to those managed identities. But of course, they don't want to make this wide open. So there's some limitations here. You have to specify which roles you can assign as a user access administrator. So it's not user access administrator, hey, I can assign any role. It's I'm giving you user access administrator, but you can only assign these roles, nothing else, these built-in roles that are listed here. So it's a limited form of user access administrator. And what's more, you can only assign these roles to managed identities. You cannot assign them to users or groups. So you can only assign roles to managed identities. So as a partner, your role assignment capabilities are constrained in that way. And then there's this special role you should always include that we're going to talk more about in the coming slides. Okay, this is the managed service registration assignment delete role. Wow. We'll talk more about that coming up. Okay, so that's your partner. You then go through the publication process for this, and this will appear in the marketplace. And let me just show you how that looks. So if I'm in my Contoso tenant here, and from here, I go to the service providers view. You can also look at it from the Lighthouse view. If I go into Lighthouse, you can get into the service providers piece here. So here, service providers, and you look in the service provider offers, and you just say add offer, and you get to browse. Look, this is all the stuff in the marketplace. BT and CDW, and I mean, you can see there's a huge range of things here. There was one I was playing with earlier, which is from Fujitsu UK. If I go into this one, I can say, okay, I'd like to get the description here. You click create, and okay, let me just go back on that. I missed a step. From here, you can click to the plan as well. So you see the description of the overall service, and then you see the individual plan that you're signing up for. And again, there can be multiple plans. Click create on this, and you can specify which subscription you're going to grant access to. Now, you must be an owner on the subscription to do this, and it's not one where there's some special other role. You can create custom roles that also have the equivalent capability. No, it's hard coded against the owner role, so you have to be owner, and you can specify where this is going to be delegated. And in the review and create tab here, you get to specify your own contact details. And also here you get to review the permissions you're going to be giving to, in this case, Fujitsu. In this case, it's a nice one because you only give them read access. and then this special remove role that I'll talk about later. So you're not giving them access to actually spend any money on your behalf. But you get the idea. You create this. You just purchase this from the marketplace. But as I say, you have to be subscription owner. I'm not going to do it because otherwise this will appear in the Fujitsu account and it might confuse them. So you get the idea how you purchase this from the marketplace. Perfect. Let's keep going. Okay. So we've talked about, I said there were two ways to onboard. One was from the marketplace and one was from a template. And before getting into the template, we're going to have to understand the object model. So there are two resource types going on under the hood here. The first, they're both in the Microsoft.Managed Services resource provider. The first one is called the registration definition, and the second one is called the registration assignment. For those familiar with policy and with role-based access control, you'll recognize that pattern of definition versus assignment. So in this case, the definition, this is what creates the relationship with the service provider. That's the thing when you make the purchase from the marketplace, it's not really a purchase, but that if you sign up from the marketplace, the way I was just showing you, that only creates the definition. It creates the relationship, and this is where you say what the tenant ID is and what permissions they're going to have and the plan from the marketplace and so on. This is all on the definition. And then having done that, you then do a registration assignment, and we'll look at how they work. And this is where you say, okay, we're going to assign permission to this particular scope. You're basically linking one of the definitions with one of your scopes, resource group or subscription. So this is what actually lights things up, so that subscription or resource group will now appear within that partner tenant. So that is the second stage. So you can create both of these resources from a template. And there is a GitHub repo. The Azure Lighthouse GitHub repo contains some example templates you can use as a starting point, and they work just fine. The demo I'm using actually just uses a vanilla one of these templates with some parameters that I specify for my tenant IDs and so on. So you just deploy those two resources and you deploy them at subscription scope. Which means you're only delegating one subscription at a time. If you want to delegate lots of subscriptions, you need to deploy, this across all those different subscriptions. So you create the definition and the assignment. In fact, the assignment doesn't have to be created in the subscription. You could do the assignment in the portal, in the template. You could do the assignment in the portal later. It's the definition that's really important. And in this case, you're not tied to any marketplace offer. You can just do this from any tenant to any other tenant, any subscription to any tenant. You can grant permissions. You could use this across EA agreements, CSP, you name it. This works. It works across all types of subscriptions. Okay, so the way this would work, of course, in a partner-customer relationship is that the partner has to provide all those parameter values to the customer to say, look, this is the template I'd like you to deploy. These are the permissions that it's going to include. This is the tenant ID I need you to include. Here it all is. Customer, if you trust me, please go deploy this template into your subscription, and that will give me permission. And the customer goes and does it. There's a bit of noise there. I wonder if whoever that is, if they have a question, is it? Or maybe we just need to mute someone's microphone. Is there a question?
I think it was muted someone accidentally. And
okay, no problem. Thank you. Okay, let's push ahead. Okay, so on the template side, let's just have a look at one of these templates. And here you can see the template. There's a few parameters at the top here. We'll talk about those in a moment. And here are the two resources. This one here is the registration definition, and you can see this contains the name, description, tenant ID, and then the authorizations. This is an object that contains all of those permissions that we talked about. And then here is the registration assignment, and this is simply you deploy it at the scope that you're assigning. In this case, it's going to go at subscription scope. But if you want to deploy a resource at a resource group scope, you deploy the assignment at a resource group scope instead if you wanted to delegate a resource group. And here it just has one property, and that is, well, what's the registration definition that I'm referring to that is relevant here. So you simply link to the definition and put it at the appropriate scope to create an assignment. So that's straightforward enough. The parameters. You provide, a description of the services, and you provide your tenant ID, and then you have this object for the authorizations where you say, look, here's the AAD object ID that I'm granting permission to. This could be a security team or an individual, whatever it is. And here's the role that I'm granting. And nicely, you can put comments on these because otherwise it's just a bunch of GUIDs and who knows what they say. But you can get these role definition IDs easy enough using PowerShell for each of the built-in roles. So it's just a simple enough structure here. And here's the user access administrator one with the delegated role definition ID saying, look, they're going to have the ability to grant the contributor role. So that's how that works. So that's straightforward enough. And then you can simply deploy this. So here is the path to those files, and it's just a new AZ deployment. This is a subscription level deployment. Run, and this will take 30 seconds to deploy, so we'll just wait for that. Any questions while we wait for the deployment? No, everything's crystal clear. Or they've left.
Nope, we've still got quite a big audience.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, they're all just stunned and amazed.
Stunned and amazed, yeah.
Oh, here we are. Why would one choose ARM templates over the marketplace experience? Is the question.
Good question. Yeah. So you may not be in the commercial marketplace. You may not be a Gold Cloud Platform partner. You may, for example, be doing this in an enterprise where you're in a multi-tenant enterprise environment. So that's one very good reason. You might be just learning how to do this and you want to just evaluate Lighthouse from a dev test point of view, from a evaluation point of view. Certainly from a partner point of view, if this is part of your commercial offering, then it does make sense to move towards the marketplace one option as you go forward. But I can certainly see the scope for using the template one. For example, while you're developing your marketplace offering, and it's going to take you a little while to figure out exactly which permissions you should be requesting and so on, and just to make sure that this works the way you think it does. So you can do that within your own subscriptions without messing around with the marketplace. Because don't forget, the marketplace publishing is a couple of days, 2-3 days it could take. So if that's your kind of dev test cycle, then it's going to be pretty slow. Whereas here you can just edit your template, change the permissions, and redeploy it, in a couple of minutes, the way I've just been deploying here. So I think there's a lot of value in the template scenario. But if you are working with real customers, then I agree the marketplace offering adds credibility, and you should aim for that as the kind of production grade approach. Does that answer the question?
Yep, that's clear apparently.
Super. Okay, so this deployed, awesome, success. And let's go and have a little look. Where's my Azure portal? Here it is. So here I'm in 2 different accounts. Fabricam, here, see at the top right here, I'm in the Fabricam directory on this second tab, and I'm in the Contoso on the first tab. Contoso is the partner, Fabricam is the customer. So here, if I go into the service providers view, you'll see I've actually delegated to Contoso twice because I do this demo using Azure Pass subscriptions, and I've had some Azure Pass subscriptions that have expired, and because they're expired, they're disabled, and I can't clean it up. So this first one is a legacy from previous demos, but this bottom one is the one I've just created. This is where I've actually created this delegation to the Contoso organization. And then the delegations here, again, there's 2 of them because one of them is on this disabled Fabricam subscription. But this is the one I just did. This is the subscription that I'm logged in. This is the subscription. If I go back to the PowerShell Fabricam subscription 3, you can see here, if I do a get AZ context, you can see Fabricam subscription 3 is the subscription I'm actually in here. That was the subscription that I did this deployment from. So that's a subscription I've delegated. So here I have I can see I've got this delegation in place, and I could here add additional delegations. You can see here I can choose to delegate. If I choose my provider, it's going to be to Contoso, and I can then choose to delegate subscriptions or resource groups. But the delegate subscription only works. This is something I think is a bug. Look, I can choose a different subscription and try to delegate it, but it will fail because I haven't got the registration definition in that subscription. The registration definition is only deployed at subscription scope. So the UI lets you try and delegate different subscriptions from where the definition is, which I think is silly because it doesn't work. And you can't create the definition at management group scope. So there's something a little bit peculiar there. But you can choose here what scope you're going to be delegating, whether that's a subscription or a resource group. And this is just creating that second resource. As I said, I could have done the template just to do the first step, the definition, and then I can do the delegation piece here. This works just fine. Okay, so enough there. If I switch to Contoso, you can see in my global subscription filter, I can choose directories. You can see I can choose which directories I'm looking at, and I could have 20 different companies here that I work with. And I can then choose subscriptions, and there's Fabricam subscription 3 available to me. I've got it alongside Contoso subscription 3, and from there I can now look at, suppose I just want to look at virtual machines. I can see here, look, virtual machines. I've got 2 virtual machines in my view. One of them is in Contoso, one of them is in Fabricam. How awesome is that? Yeah, they're just there now. It's just like I'm working within my normal tenant. It's pretty cool. Okay, fantastic. Let's push ahead. Okay, let's have a little bit of a look at the permissions that we need to do this, because again, permissions are important here. So obviously, as an MSP, you've got to publish the marketplace offer, and that all comes down to your marketplace, your partner center access. So you'll need to be in the commercial marketplace program, and that requires a silver gold cloud platform competency. You'll to accept the customer, for the customer to actually acquire your offer from the marketplace, doesn't require any steps, any action from the partner at all. And also, when I did that demo just now and I deployed that, if I deployed that template, all I needed was Contoso's tenant ID. So if any of you put your tenant ID in the chat, I can deploy that subscription giving you access, and there's nothing you can do about it. If I know your tenant ID, I can grant you access. So simple as that. You can't stop me giving you access. So you may not want access, but that's tough. If I know your tenant ID, I can do it. That's the way it works. Now, remember that special role we talked about, the managed services registration assignment delete role. Wow. That role gives you all those roles that you specify in your marketplace offer. Those roles, that's what permissions you have in the customer's subscription. And don't forget, these 2 resources that set up the relationship, they both live in the customer's subscription. So if I just come over here, you can see that from the Contoso side, if I go to my customer's experience, I can look at the delegations. That should work. Let's just refresh. There we go. So there's the Fabricam subscription that we just created from the template. That's why it says no marketplace offer. This came from the template, and I can delete this, and this will work because I have that role included in the template. And in your marketplace offers, you should always include that role. That gives you the ability to do this delete. But if I was Fabricam and I deployed this same template, but I didn't give you that delete role, well, then you wouldn't be able to delete this. You would have permissions, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can raise a support ticket to get rid of it, I'm sure, but there's no self-service way for you to actually remove those permissions. I've given you permissions, and you can't get rid of them. And likewise, if you look at the customers list, this is the definition that creates this entry here. This one you can't delete. There's no special permissions to delete this. You're stuck with this one. Only owners can delete this, and you can't be given owner permissions. So this one you're stuck with. So if I have your tenant ID, I can just pollute your view with potentially hundreds of unwanted tenants. So that's a little unfortunate. And the product group, I have spoken to them, and they are aware, and there are plans in place to improve this in the future to give the partner a little bit more control and the ability, a stronger abilities to evict unwanted customers. But at the moment, that's how it works. Okay. So that is these permissions here. So that was for this setup piece. On the customer side, to purchase that offer from the marketplace, you need to be the owner on the subscription, and it's not supported on custom roles. It has to be the full-on subscription owner role. Service admin doesn't do it. You have to actually be the RBAC owner. If you're a service admin, you'll have to go and grant RBAC owner, and then you go from there. And And to do the delegation on the subscription or resource group, again, is tied to the owner role. So personally, it drives me nuts when Microsoft does this and ties things to the owner role rather than having it just to specific permissions within the owner role, because this means you can't have any fine-grained access on this. If you need to be the owner for some other reason, so for example, you need to be the owner because you're using blueprints with system assigned managed identity, that again requires owner role. If you were owner for that reason, well then someone gave you owner role so you could do that, but now you can do this as well, which they didn't want to let you do, but there's no avoiding it because they don't really work. They don't properly respect RBAC. You can't do it in custom roles. It's tied, hard-coded to the owner role. That's how that has been designed. Okay, so that's the permissions you need on the customer side. On the MSP to manage this, as we said, the registration definition defines the list of permissions that you are going to be given. And we've talked about how that works. And you should always include that delete role in your marketplace offers. But as I say, someone doing it from a template doesn't have to include it. So then you're just stuck with them. Okay. So limitations around these roles. You can only use built-in roles. You cannot assign custom roles across to the partner. It's built-in roles only, and it's only RBAC roles, no classic roles. And also remember we said this only works on roles on activities that come through Resource Manager. When you're accessing something like a Key Vault endpoint that is perhaps using AAD authentication but not coming through Resource Manager, it's just a data plane operation. Those are not supported in Lighthouse, and for that reason, any roles using data actions are not supported. It's only actions, not data actions, which is most of the normal roles. Just there are some specific roles that use data actions for accessing these data endpoints, so they don't work. You can't assign the owner role, and there are limitations on the user access administrator role, which we talked about already. They can only assign the roles which are listed, and it can only assign them to managed identities. And the last thing, which I hope they fix, is resource locks are not respected. If you as a customer have some resources that are locked, the partner, the locks don't apply. They it's as if they're not there. Blueprint locks work fine because they work in a different way. They work using a RBAC deny assignment. That's a talk for another day. But the standard resource locks aren't respected, bizarrely. I hope they fix that. Okay, so let's have a little look at how delegated resources are managed. We've already seen the global subscription filter, how you can choose your directory and choose your subscriptions within that view. And we've also seen the standard view where you can just see, look, these are my virtual machines, and across all the resource types, of course, virtual networks, public IP addresses, I don't know, data bricks, whatever it is, you can list them out and just manage them as if they're in your tenant in a normal subscription. It's, that's just awesome. You have these standard views in the portal, the virtual machine view we just talked about, but then you have a security center. Again, security center respects the global subscription filter. So if you've selected multiple subscriptions, hey, it's going to work, and you can have a security center dashboard that covers 10 of your customers. You can have that, a single dashboard covering everything across your customers rather than having to switch context the whole time. So that works beautifully. Similar for Azure Advisor. Security Center and Azure Advisor both respect the global subscription filter. So that works very nicely. And there are some services that are moving to be Lighthouse aware, if you like. Backup Explorer is a new feature of Azure Backup, and they've done a nice job of making this work multi-tenant, so you can view backup across, you can monitor backup status across backups, across vaults, across recovery service vaults, across regions, across tenants, across subscriptions, across everybody. So you can have a nice single view there. Although I think they're missing something in this view. It doesn't actually have a column that tells you which customer it is. So that's a bit of a gap. But I think you can click in and you could work it out. I hope they add that column in the future. Okay, so that's the standard views to manage resources. Management groups. This is a bit of a gap, if you like. Basically, they don't work. From a customer point of view, if you're purely working within the customer tenant, as a customer, you can use management groups as normal. You can set your subscriptions into a management group hierarchy, use the management groups for RBAC policy, view cost reports or compliance reports at management group scope. Everything works from a customer point of view. But once you come into Lighthouse, that customer management group hierarchy is not visible to the partner. So the partner sees these delegated subscriptions and delegated resource groups, but they've no visibility into the customer's management group hierarchy. So there may be policy that's assigned there, for example, that the partner cannot see. So they might see deployments that are being denied. It's like, oh, why can't I create this G series VM? And it's because there's a policy there, and it's a policy violation. The policy will apply, but the partner can't see the policy because they have no visibility into the management group. So on the customer side, so that's how that works. But what about the MSP's management group hierarchy? Well, obviously the MSP have their own tenant, and within that tenant, they can build their own management group hierarchy where they can put their own subscriptions. However, you can't put these guest subscriptions, these customer subscriptions, delegated subscriptions into your partner management group hierarchy. You can only put your actual real partner subscriptions in. So that doesn't help you either. So effectively, management groups are just not part of the game here. So that means if you are handling things like policy, then as a partner, you may be providing governance services across a number of customer subscriptions within a single customer, then you're going to have to do things like policy on a per subscription basis. You're not going to be able to manage that customer at a management group scope. You're just going to have to apply this across at the per subscription level, which is fine. You might want to invest in some automation around that, but that's fine. If you are doing policy on behalf of your customer, then the other thing is, of course, because your policy has been assigned at subscription scope, even though you might have the same policy assigned across 10 subscriptions within one customer, you're not going to get an aggregated view of policy compliance because you're going to get 10 different compliance reports because it's 10 different policy assignments. There's no aggregation there. So that's unfortunate that there's no way to do that. Policy remediation, this is where you have some policies, if it's a deploy if not exists or a modify policy, they can where resources are non-compliant, you can run a remediation job which will go fix up those resources for you. It's a fairly advanced feature of Azure policy, but just be aware that it can work. You can set up remediation and get this to work and remediate across into the delegated scopes, but it requires some special setup. I'm not going to go through the step-by-step on that, but just be aware that there's a documentation page that will walk you through it. You will need to deploy the policy assignment from a template. You can't do it any other way. It has to be a template deployment because it needs to use a preview resource ID on the role assignment for the managed identity. And that preview role assignment includes this. There's a parameter there on the screen. You see delegated managed identity resource ID. What a mouthful. It looks very complicated, and you look at it and you'll scratch your head and bang your head against the desk for a while thinking, what on earth is this trying to say? But just copy and paste out the documentation, fill in the right GUIDs, and it works. So I have done it. It does work. The documentation is good. It doesn't really explain what's going on. Just it does work though. So that's how that works. So you can get remediation to work if you try hard enough. Activity log, everything works as you would expect it to. So if the customer does stuff, it goes into the customer's activity log, and the MSP has visibility into that log, assuming they have the reader role. Also, if the MSP does action in the customer subscription, then those MSP actions also go into the customer's activity log. They don't go into the MSP's activity log. They go into the customer's activity log. And that means they're visible to the customer, and it will show the identity of the user within the MSP who performed the action. So you can set up alerts on the activity log, automation, all of this. Everything should just work as normal. So the activity log just works. It works really nicely. We can have a look at some of these things. How are we for time? Okay, we're okay for time. We're at the end here now. So let's just have a quick look, and then we can take any final questions. Here we are. We've seen this view already. We saw the. Let's just go. Yeah, this is in the Contoso tenant. So we're in the partner view here. If we look at those virtual machines again, we can see here we have the Fabricam machine, which is in the customer tenant, and we can do. This is running. We can do. Let's say we're going to stop this machine. Yeah, do we want to stop it? Do we want to reserve the public IP? No. Okay, let's just stop that machine. So now this is us stopping the machine on behalf of our customer. And we can look in a minute or two and we'll see the entry in the activity log for that. So that just shows, we can actually do stuff. We have permission. Again, I have contributor permissions, if you remember. Let's have a look at some other things we can use here. If let's say security center here, this will just give us a standard overview. And you can see here 2 compute apps and resources. If I click into this, This is showing me VMs. Oh, look, I've got 2 different VMs here, again, from Fabricam and Contoso. So I'm getting my recommendations coming through. Just whatever's in the global subscription filter is going to come through here. It just works fine. If I look at Recovery Services Vault, if I just find one, we can, there it is. So I'm looking at the Fabricam Recovery Services Vault here, and I can go to if you haven't used this before, it's fantastic. So they've had these 2 new things here, Backup Reports and Backup Explorer. Reports is kind of deep dive reports based around log analytics. That takes a bit of setting up. But Backup Explorer, I believe, is built directly off the resource graph. So it's there for free. It's automatically set up for you. It just works. So anytime you're doing Azure Backup, you can always just go into the Recovery Services Vault and click on the overview blade, click Backup Explorer. It's always there, always works. And this gives you just an overall dashboard of your backup state over the last, it covers about 7 days data. And you can choose here, even though I went in from a particular vault, you can actually, that's just your entry point to this view. And from here you can choose, I'm going to cover this across all my subscriptions, including from both tenants. I'm going to do this for all my vaults. I might have vaults in various locations here. I've got vaults in both of my tenants, actually, but I could have 100 vaults here. I could have lots of different vaults. And I can see here what my backup items are. I can list out my backup items. I've got my backup for both Contoso and Fabricam. So I'm getting a lovely multi-tenant view of my backup all in one place. I could identify machines that don't, now there aren't any, but I could identify machines that don't have backup enabled, all from one view across all of my customers, which is pretty cool, I have to say. That's pretty awesome. Let's have a quick look at that activity log. If I go to the virtual machines, it was this one that we stopped, wasn't it? If I just go into the activity log for this machine, we should see, look, deallocate, there it is, accepted, it's run, that's happening. And if I switch tenant now, I'm going into my Fabricam identity. So I'm in the Fabricam, I'm here now, I'm the customer. And within this space, I might again want to look at, well, what virtual machines do I have? Well, I only see the one, of course. I don't see the Contoso VM. And in here, I might look and think, oh, this one's deallocated. What on earth's going on there? Who did that? I can go into my activity log, and there I see it. I see the deallocate that the customer did on my behalf, and I can dig into this, and I can see exactly what's gone on here. I can see the JSON of this. And I can see who did, look, caller, JAT Labo 1, and this is the identity of the user I'm using over here on Contoso, you can see. So this would be, typically, I mean, this is an Outlook.com because it's an Azure Pass subscription, but this could have been a JAT Labo 1 at Contoso.com. This, I'd see here, oh, look, that was Jonathan in the Contoso. He stopped my VM. I wonder why he did that. If I want to complain about it, I can, phone up and it's all visible to me. So there's nothing hidden from the customer. Okay, that's it. Questions. We have a few minutes left for questions before we hand over to the next session.
So people feel free to unmute and just ask questions directly. Do we have any?
Does anyone have any questions? Oh, there's a little bit of echo.
Oh, that's probably my mic picking that up.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an ops person, Jonathan, but just as you were going through that, you seem to be bumping up against a few rough edges. Would you say this is, production grade yet, or?
It's still officially in preview. I think it's certainly. I mean, it does work. I mean, fundamentally, it does work. There's a little bit confusing thing in the UI, as I say, where it gives you the option to delegate subscriptions that you haven't actually created a definition for, which then, of course, fails. So there's something a little bit rough in the UI there. But other than that, where it's, so that's something that's not supposed to work that the UI is letting you attempt. But the stuff that's supposed to work does work. So that's what I would say there.
It does what you need it to do.
Yeah.
And I think this is amazing. Like I'm actually wowed by it. I used to work in the managed service provider space and was sort of responsible for creating a managed service wrapper around Azure for more traditional service provider. So I love this. This is great.
Okay, yeah, because if you are in that space, then you look at this and you go, oh my God, this is awesome. I mean, conceptually, it's actually really, really powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of enterprises, they'll look at this and think, yeah, doesn't apply to me, don't care. I mean, that's fine. But
then,
if you are a partner, this is awesome.
Yeah, like you said as well, if you're part of like a large organization, and you have different tenants, or you've just been onto an acquisition, or you mucked up at the beginning and you have multiple tenants, because that's definitely a problem that some people have. I think this is great. I've like literally sent people that I used to work with links to it already.
Okay. Yeah, there's a copy of this talk actually that Microsoft recorded, and it's supposed to go on YouTube at some point. So if anyone wants that, then feel free to ping me. I'm just going to put my details in the chat there.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
So I'll put my details there, and then if we're done, then I just have the blatant plug, of course, that this is us. Everyone who's locked up at home and is keen to study Azure, then just sign up to Skill Me Up. It's awesome, and you'll see there we have our the blatant plug. We have hands-on labs, live instructor classes, expert talks, and videos. And if there's speakers actually who are interested in giving expert talks, do reach out to me, because we do pay for expert talks for the Skill Me Up live service. So you can get certified, and also loads of deep dive stuff that goes well beyond certification, stuff like this. So that's that. There's the blatant plug.